Morning. So we're starting with Iyov. And obviously the first question with the book of Iyov, it's a very unusual book for the Tanakh. What is Iyov talking about? What is this book about? What is it doing in our Tanakh? What it's all about. So at first glance, the book of Iyov is talking about the philosophical question of tzaddik v'ra rasha v'tov lo. But it might be that it's not the focus of the book. Yes, we could draw such principles that pertain to that philosophical question or theological question, however we want to frame it. Hi, Chani. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you came in. But it's not necessarily the focus of the book, and I'll explain what I mean. Tanakh in general doesn't talk about theological questions, right? The Tanakh is their stories, their history. There's Hashem saying things, and there are people listening to Hashem or not listening to Hashem, but it doesn't grapple with philosophical or theological questions. That's not what Tanakh does. But it does mention there is a question that comes up again and again in Tanakh that we could relate to it as a theological question that does come up in quite a few places. What question is that? Let's see if you could...
You said already, Tzaddik v'ra.
Right. So I said it about Iyov, but that question actually comes up in Tanakh in a few places, already in Sefer Bereshit. Then when Avraham Avinu has a conversation with Hashem, then Ashofet kol haaretz lo yaseh mishpat. Of course, Shofet haaretz needs to do mishpat. That is seen as an important principle, and then the principle of sachar ve'onesh comes up again and again in the Torah, in Sefer Dvarim, Torah Tagmul, and then through the Nevi'im as well. But there we could say that it doesn't come up as a philosophical or theological principle. It's one of the facts that are stated. But as a problem that needs dealing with, not necessarily. But it does come up as a problem that needs dealing with in other books, and we saw some of those places as well. This is a test. One place that you might remember? Let's see if you remember. Sorry? In Shlomo HaMelech, where?
Ecclesiastes.
Sorry?
Ecclesiastes.
Kohelet. In Kohelet. Okay. So we didn't see Kohelet yet, but in Kohelet, he deals with it maybe, but in a different way. But Kohelet's focus is not Hashem, but man. And even if there are philosophical questions, it has to do with philosophical questions which he's grappling with, that some of them might have to do with Hashem. Well, eventually they do, but it's not apparent throughout the book. It's like it's trying to find meaning in life. It's a whole different question. But tzaddik v'ra lo, that question itself is mentioned. So in Yirmiyahu, do you remember the pasuk in at the beginning of the 12th chapter? Tzaddik ata Hashem, ki yariv elecha, ach mishpatim adaber otach, madua derech reshaim tzalecha shalu kol bogdei baged. At a certain point, Yirmiyahu looks at Hashem and he says, I know you're righteous. However, and therefore I allow myself to speak harshly to you and tell you things the way they are, the way I see them. Why is it that the way of the wicked succeeds? So we Yirmiyahu already, and then the entire perek talks about it. So we see Yirmiyahu is also grappling in some way with that question. And then there's another place. Where's the other place? A place that we there are a few other places that we saw, but
Did we do Chavakuk yet?
we didn't do Chavakuk yet. Maybe also okay. Tehillim, there are a few Mizmorim that deal with it. So Mizmor Ein Gimel, for instance, starts with Ki kineti ba'olelim shlom resha'im ere. I was jealous of those who of the hedonistic people, that the peace of the wicked people I see, meaning they live in peace. They have such a wonderful life, these wicked people, while the tzaddikim. So Tehillim also deals with it. In Megillat Eicha that we're about to read at a certain point, right? So here too, Mipi Elyon lo tetzeh haraot ve'atov. At a certain point, Yirmiyahu writes in Eicha, there are those who look at the Churban and want to say, Yirmiyahu disagrees with them, he argues with them, but they say that Mipi Elyon lo tetzeh haraot ve'atov. Good and evil doesn't come from Hashem, because you see, it keeps on getting to the wrong address, right? Those who deserve good get evil, and vice versa. So it cannot be that it comes from Hashem. And then so this matter does come up in Tanakh again. There are a few other places, but we don't need to see all the places that it is mentioned. But if Tanakh, we just started it. So I just said that the question of tzaddik v'ralo and rasha v'tovlo is a recurring question in Tanakh. And even though Tanakh doesn't deal with theology, with that question, that question seems to come up again and again. So if Tanakh would have dealt with other, let's call it theological questions, such as, let's say, questions that later on in history, a lot of, to this day, right, we have books written, for instance, on Yediah B'chira, right? How is it that Hashem knows everything that will happen, yet human beings still have freedom of choice, right? That's a philosophical question. That's a theological question. It's an important question. Not dealt with in Tanakh. Olam hazeh and olam haba. Tanakh doesn't mention anything about it. So many theological questions, philosophical questions are not dealt with in Tanakh, but this one question, not only is it dealt with, but now we're at Sefer Iyov, and at the heart of the book, this is what it's about Sachar, about why is it that the wicked prosper and the righteous suffer. So
did you bring up that the wicked prosper, or only tzaddik v'ralo?
So that's a good question. Maybe that we'll see. It could be that some of the chaverim, when they talk about it, maybe they might bring it up, or maybe Yov at the very end. But you're right. Why is it that the righteous suffer? That's the question in Iyov. So why is it that comes up generally in Tanakh? That's something that is mentioned in Tanakh, but not any other question. Why is it? What do you think?
I think it's the most fundamental question. How can things be? How can Yediah versus Bechira? It's more about how does it all work? But this is like the basis of everything else.
Okay. So I think you're onto something, but I think it could be said even in a stronger way. There's something fundamental about this question that is not there with other questions. I'll give you an example. When I was growing up in Israel, it was a long time ago, and parents still felt that from time to time it's okay to give a small flick to their child that she's really being naughty. Right, yes, especially if the child was me and I was quite naughty.
Some of us do it till today.
Yeah. So I remember getting a touch from my father, and okay, I wouldn't say it didn't hurt. It might have hurt. I don't remember whether it hurt or not. But what I do remember was in Hebrew you say elbon, was the more than shame, the
Humility.
The humility, the question, like, how is it that you could do something like this? Like, and so it wasn't the fact that I got the Paj, it was who gave it to me, and under what circumstances. It was like, how could you do this to me, right? It wasn't a suffering. It wasn't a question of suffering. It was a question of relationship. Meaning it was because it was my father. Meaning if a stranger would have come and gave me a stira, maybe, oh, it hurts. Okay, yeah, so, okay, 2 minutes go by. I might be very angry. All right, who do you think you are? But I wouldn't be devastated. But because of the relationship, it becomes devastating. And I think that is the question with, it's not a theoretical question of who gets good, who gets bad. It's how could Hashem do this? It's a question of our relationship with Hashem. It's not a theoretical question. How is it that Hashem knows and yet human beings have bchira? That is an interesting question. It's something that we are curious about. It's something that we might want to know, something that would help us know things, but it's not kiyumi, it's not existential. It's just philosophical. The question of tzaddik veralo is existential. When a person feels that they don't deserve suffering, yet they receive it, or if they see, even if seeing someone else receiving it, it also could, but when it's myself, and even more. But even if with some, it's not a philosophical question. It's a relationship question with Hashem. Like, what do you want from me? What do you want from me? Because that's our most fundamental question: is what does Hashem want from us? And I think that is really the question that I think Tanakh doesn't deal so much with philosophy. Well, we saw Mishlei, there is a bit wisdom, but I'm not sure that wisdom is philosophy. It has to do with life. It's not theoretical question, but definitely not with theology. And I think Iyov might be mistaken for theology, but it's not necessarily so. Well, I'm saying it's a mistake. It's chutzpah for me to say that it's a mistake, because some of our great sages thought that it is theology, right? The Rambam holds that Sefer Iyov is definitely theology. But I think it doesn't have to be seen that way. It could be seen as a question of how do we have a relationship with, what is the nature of our relationship with Hashem?
What's that? The book that Rambam quotes the most from is Iyov.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
What did he say?
Yeah, but the book that the Rambam quotes from most is Iyov. Unfortunately, I don't think that's it.
That's what I read.
No, but it depends where you're looking. If you look in the end of Moreh Nevuchim, then he quotes from him a lot, because that's the topic that he's talking about.
That's what I'm saying.
But he devotes a whole section to explaining Iyov, so that's why he quotes it. But if you look in, I don't know, the Mishneh Torah, which is a much bigger book, then there's no reference to Iyov at all. And
Phil is our expert on yeah, but it could be okay.
Can I say something, please?
Sure.
I think it's because when we are punched and we don't give back the punch, this is when we say "Vilim kalelai nafshiti dom." So I think, and even in the situation of Israel, that people say don't put punch back. That's what made all these things. You know, I don't understand. I don't explain myself well. I just when the Jews were just persecuted and everything, and they did react. That's what happened. They suffered. But when Israel started to give back, then things were better. But we say every day, "Velim kalelai nafshiti dom."
Yes. So so there's a contradiction there. Do we have to fight back, or do we just?
When you are punched, you have to fight back.
Yes.
So are you saying
So that-
fight back God?
So that is
God
when
gave
someone.
us freedom.
Yes, but
So
what
we have to
if?
take it up.
But what if we feel that Hashem is the one that is punching us? Like, let's say, like the story of Iyov, right?
I think-
So Hashem.
It's not God who is not punching us. It's He gave us Bechira. And with the Bechira, we do whatever we can. So we have to.
Right. So I think throughout Tanakh we'll see that is definitely what you are saying now is the notion that we have so much is in our hands. Hashem keeps right in the whole book of Sefer Dvarim, right? That's what Sefer Dvarim is telling us. It's all in your hands. There is bchira. נתתי לפניך את החיים והטוב ואת המוות ואת הרע ובחרת בחיים למען תחיה אתה וזרעך. Right? That is, you have freedom of choice, and if you choose well, then things will be well. Well, and statistically, it is so. But statistically, meaning the book of Iyov comes to tell us it could be, here Iyov is right. Let's read the beginning of Iyov. Iyov, yeah. איש היה בארץ עוץ איוב שמו והאיש היו תם וישר וירא אלוקים ושר מרע. And then there is what then there is a wager between Hashem and the Satan, right?
I found that probably the hardest bit to understand.
Yeah.
Not so bad.
I think because the book wants us to not make the mistake that there was something justified here. No. This was totally arbitrary. Even like there was no reason for Iyov. Nothing that Iyov did made him deserve this. I think that's what it means. So it's like, so the story wants to make it clear. Like the only reason, right? It says here. Where is it? So Hashem tells the Satan, "Asamta libcha lavdi Iyov, ki en kamo bechol haaretz ish tam v'yashar yireh Elohim v'sar mera." ויען השטן אל השם ויאמר, החינם ירא איוב אלוקים, הלא אתה שרת בעדו ועד ביתו ועד כל אשר. So Satan says, no, it's just because all the good things. ואולם שלח נא ידך וגע בכל אשר לו, אם לא על פניך יברכך. ויאמר השם לשטן, הנה כל אשר לא בידיך, רק אליו אל תשלח ידיך. Meaning, Hashem wants to make a point to Satan. So he says, do to Iyov whatever you want, and you'll see, he'll still be good. But
it's not much better.
It's not Iyov's fault that Satan thinks that. Sorry?
The Greek thoughts on that basis.
Okay, that's a whole other question. We might have a better understanding as we go through Iyov, but that is the story. Meaning here, it's not something that Iyov did. It's just Hashem wants to prove something to Satan, and Iyov is the poor mouse in the laboratory that is going to prove the point. Right? Okay. So I think it has to do with a question of but okay. So let's take it back to where I want to say that Iyov is telling us about the perspective of Iyov more than it is telling us about the philosophy of how to explain that perspective. And I'll explain. Iyov speaks in the book, and his speak in the book as well. They give whole neumim, and we tend to think, Iyov must be right, they must be wrong. From a philosophical point of view, it could be that they are right. Meaning, when Bildad HaShuchi says whatever he says, maybe he has a point. But the book of Iyov doesn't care about the points that Bildad has to do, because right now he is in a very bad place. So Iyov is described, meaning you might be right, but you are, meaning when someone says something which is metaphysically correct, but the question is from the point of view of the human being's chavaya, experience, it doesn't matter what is the metaphysical structure. Right now, I'm in a bad place. I feel that Hashem just is slapping me for no reason, and I'm suffering. And like, what's going on here? Why do I? And it's more than the coming back to the smack from my father. It's more than the smack. It's the relationship. It's the like when the father gives a smack. It's not just a smack that hurts. It's also, it means he doesn't approve of me. He's not happy with me. Like the nature of our relationship with Hashem is that we want his approval, and I'm not getting it. What's wrong? What's going on here? So that I think is something very important in the book. In the book of Iyov.
It's important that we don't take good behavior as cause and effect. If I do all the mitzvot, then everything's going to be fine for me. Seems to be a
Point.
oh,
That's precisely the point.
yeah, but it isn't that way. It can't be that way. How can
Why
it-
can't it be that way?
Because if it was automatically that way, then I don't need faith. I have to have belief. I have to have faith. And if I realize that for every action there's an equal opposite reaction, that's physics. If I want to do the same thing in religion, that's not physics, that's faith.
Okay,
It's gotta be-
okay.
it's gotta be
But
different.
you're now getting into the philosophical
I can't-
area. No. That's okay. That's good. That's fine. And it could be that we can draw those philosophical ideas from the book of Iyov. I don't know if that is the purpose of the book. I think the purpose of the book is more to tell us about the experience, about the existential experience of Iyov, and I'll try to explain it in another way. And this way, I heard from Rav Moshe Lichtenstein, and this is what he says. He tries to explain it through, or to express it through the difference between Nevi'im and Ketuvim. We have Nevi'im, we have Ketuvim. What is the difference between Nevi'im and Ketuvim? There are a few ways of seeing the difference between Nevi'im and Ketuvim. So the most obvious way of showing the difference between Nevi'im and Ketuvim is that Nevi'im is the level of engagement by Hashem, meaning Nevi'im are a strong revelation of Hashem to a person. That is a high level of Hitgalut. While Ketuvim is a certain divine inspiration that is upon of the person that is writing it, but it's not that the Kohelet is hearing the voice of Hashem as he's writing Kohelet, as opposed to Yirmiyahu, who's hearing the voice of Hashem telling him the prophecy. So it's a level of the revelation. That is I think the most common way of understanding it. Another way. I don't remember who, but someone in the House of Brisk explains that actually it has nothing to do with the level of revelation. They're both holy in the same, the level of holiness is the same. It's just the nature of the book. A nevuah originally was not a book. A nevuah originally was a prophecy, meaning a prophet was given a mission to go and tell something to someone. So it didn't, the prophecy didn't start its life here on earth as a written text. It came here as a prophecy, as of a prophet telling whoever is this prophecy is addressed at the prophecy. And then it's nevuah hanitzrecha ledorot that Chazal tell us that a nevuah shenitzrecha ledorot was written down, meaning prophecy that can teach us a lesson in years that is not what do you call it? Timely?
Time restricted.
That I'm sorry, it's not time restricted, meaning it could teach us a lesson as well, but it's put down and written. So it started its life as a prophecy, and then it was written, and that is Nevi'im. As opposed to Ketuvim were written, meaning it's a more general idea, and therefore the idea is expressed by writing it down, and now everyone could read it and see the idea. Maybe it was given as a shiur before, but it's not it's not essential to it becoming, as opposed to the prophecy. It's essential that it was first said as a prophecy and then written down. So it's two different ways of coming into this world. Sorry?
Where does Iyov fit into that? It's presumably an experience that then got written down.
Good question. Depends. We'll get to that question in a moment. We'll get to that. I want to cover that question because I've already discussed that question. And Phil wants to say something about it because the Rambam had something to say about it. But and Phil is the prophet of the Rambam. That way. But so we'll get to it in a moment. So those are two different ways of seeing the difference between Nevi'im and Ketuvim. Another way of seeing the difference between Nevi'im and Ketuvim is that Nevi'im deal with society, with the public. It's not necessarily something it's not dealing with the life of an individual, as opposed to Ketuvim, it's an individual. So it's a story of an individual. So there are books that are like the book of Esther. Is it of an individual? It's not so clear, but okay, but more or less we could see it that way. But the fourth definition, I think, is the most interesting, and the one that I want to that if we accept it, could say something about the book of Iyov. It might be that the difference between Nevi'im and Ketuvim is the point of view. The Navi is Hashem's point of view, meaning the prophecy is Ko Amar Hashem. This is the words of Hashem, and meaning we are not focusing on the human being, but on Hashem's will. And now, of course, the human being must follow that will, and that's that. But the Ketuvim are looking at that Dvar Hashem, but from the perspective of the human being. Like, how do I react to Dvar Hashem? How does it make me feel? What is right? We learned the book of Tehillim. It has to do with my experience of standing before Hashem. Mishlei has to do with my experience being in the world of Hashem. We'll learn other books that they all have to do with the perspective, with the human perspective. So they all deal with Dvar Hashem, and how we define exactly Dvar Hashem. That's a good question, but we can assume that they all deal with Dvar Hashem. But from whose perspective? From the perspective of the one who's giving the Davar of Hashem, or of the one who now have to live with Dvar Hashem. How do we do it? If we see Ketuvim as that, and Iyov is part of the book of Ketuvim, then it makes more sense of understanding Iyov, as we said to begin with, that then it's not from the point of when we deal with theology. Theology is let's say we could refer to it as, I'm not saying it in a bad way, but one might say as celestial plumbings. Yes. How does the system up there work? No, I mean like right. Okay, so how is it exactly? So here's God knowing, and here's divine ordinary, and here the human being still has bchira, and okay, sachar ve'onesh, how exactly is distributed? I'm not talking about my experience. I'm talking about the metaphysics of it all, of how it works. Questions like that, if dealt in Tanakh according to the division that I just suggested, or that Rav Moshe Lichtenstein suggests, then if dealt with, it has to be dealt with in Nevi'im. But Iyov is in Ketuvim, so it must be that it's from the human perspective, more from the experiential perspective. Okay, maybe good, nice way of putting it. But I think when we read Iyov, it's really, we could see that the human perspective is emphasized again and again. So I want to conclude this part by saying that indeed the Rambam understands that this theology and writes again and again that sees it as a book of theology. But I think when we read Iyov, it looks like it's dealing with his experience in a very strong way. And here I want to say one other thing about the book of Iyov, and start with with the question that Chazal have in Masechet Bava Batra, is it? I think. Yes, in Bava Batra Daf Tishvav, whoever wants to see the discussion, and that is, when did Iyov live? And here I'm relating to what you said before, David. There are different opinions about what Chazal tried to give historical and geographical context to the story of Iyov and give different suggestions. But there is one answer that the Rambam likes and takes that answer as the final one, and that is Iyov lo haya velo nivra. That Iyov never really. He's a fictional figure. He's not a historical figure. And then the Gemara goes on to a discussion, but then why give us a name and a place? By the way, it's interesting because in English, in Hebrew, we have Ishaya Beretz Utz, and when the Wizard of Oz was translated, it was translated as Hakosem Eretz Utz. And I was wondering, is there a connection between the two? And I looked online, and it says that there is no connection. It's just that the translator thought it would be nice. Oz sounds like Utz, and therefore he made the connection. I'm not too sure. It's just, but I think there is a connection because, first of all, Utz is pronounced Az meaning Utz. Az is a place in Iraq, I think, in northern Iraq. It's called Utz in Hebrew and Az in English, and it's actually a place, and that is there are a lot of suggesting that is the Utz that the Torah is actually talking about. It's a city that still exists today. And Dorothy also has her friends, right? Yeah. And her world was also shaken, right? Her world is shaken, and then she meets friends that help her through it, and then there is this wizard and there the question, is the wizard real or not real? And here Iyov, is he real or not real? Okay, anyhow, okay. Yeah, you concentrate in Molena Bukhim. This is too deep. No. So I was just thinking there might be some parallels there. Anyhow, coming back to our question, Iyov, was he actually an actual historical figure, or is he a fictional figure? So you might ask, why would the Tanakh have a fictional figure? It's not. The Tanakh deals with real things. If Iyov is not real, then why have him? So the Rambam
Control the narrative.
Very good. Sorry?
Don't start worrying. Don't have the same
Right. But the Ben Soel Moed is a different, because there it's not a story, it's a law pertaining to a situation that never occurred and never will occur. That's one thing, but here you have a whole story that pertains to what? So obviously it comes to teach us a lesson, but what does it mean that it didn't happen? So dealing with the question of what is real is actually an important question. It's not so clear that something that happened is more real than something that didn't happen. You spoke about controlling the narrative, yes. And I think in that sense, one could argue the other way around. For instance, Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle will say that history is a coincidence, right? Anything that happens could have happened otherwise, and it happened to happen this way, not that way. But if I want to think of a real story, then I'll think of a story that didn't happen, because there I could build a narrative which is true in the logical sense, in some sense that corresponds to, meaning a story that had to happen, not a story that actually happened, but this is the story the way it should have happened. Okay, so meaning it refers to a certain ideal. Okay, there is an ideal story, and then there is the actual story. For instance, Plato, when he looks at the world, then he says there are lots of, for instance, let's take a triangle. No triangle is a real triangle, right? Because if we'll be really, really accurate and we'll measure really correctly, then we'll see at the corners it's not really. It doesn't really have only three things, because at the corners it's a bit like that, so it's already not a triangle, right? Or all kinds of things like that. Or let's say if we want it to be an exact triangle, so no, how do you say shvetzlaot? So right, so it depends. If you have very good measuring things, then you'll see that all triangles in the world are not. So where is that meshulash tzlaot? Equilateral triangle. Where is he? Oh, that's in the
Olam ha'ideyot.
Olam ha'ideyot, or as Chazal will, or as in Hebrew we will say Olam ha'emet, right? Olam ha'emet, because this Olam is Alma Deshika. The ideals don't exist in this world. Only instances that reflect that emet, but it's not the ideal itself. We won't find here. So if I want to create an ideal story, that ideal story would never happen in history, because history is messy, because maybe there is, right, Yecholet Bchira, someone came in here and messed up the whole thing, and I don't have that story. But I want to give that story the way it should be. So of course I'll go to a fictional story, because there I could give the true story the way it should be. So there's nothing wrong in giving a fictional story. Sometimes I could get something out of fiction that I wouldn't get out of a real story. But
this gamble, this bet between Hashem and Satan can really only be explained if it's a fictional story.
oh, why?
Son of God, so.
Why Hashem doesn't really exist? Is that
The Malachim are supposed to be, aren't supposed to have free will.
Sorry?
The Malachim are not supposed to have free will. They're the
Okay. So, but okay, maybe there is. I don't know exactly how it works. I've never been up there, and I don't know.
Think about how it works. It probably only works if it's fictional.
I don't know. It might work some way. I don't know. I don't know if that is an actual. Okay, maybe that's one of the reasons that Rambam said that it didn't really happen. But I'm not too sure that everyone would say that. But let's come back to the question itself. Why do Chazal? There is the opinion that Iyov is fiction, okay, but then there are 9 other opinions that no, he actually existed, and there are different suggestions about when. Why was it so important to Chazal that to say no, he actually did exist? To those who said that it did exist, I think it has to do with a real a historical figure is someone that we could have a relationship with. Let's say when we read about or when we learn about Avraham Avinu is not just a man that once upon a time there was a story with him. We have a relationship with him. He's Avinu. We could identify with him in many ways, and we have a relationship with him because he was a historical figure. If someone would come and say, the Avot are just general figures, who knows if they ever existed, it will make us feel, no, I want Avraham Avinu to really be there. And so other figures, it's a whole different relationship. If we're talking about Iyov as a fictional, right, it's like talking to AI, right? So I could feel as if I'm having a relationship, but it's not a real relationship. so there's something there as well. What really might pull towards the fictional side is the ending of Iyov. We didn't get to the ending yet, but I'll ruin the story now for you. I'll tell you the ending. At the end, there's a happy ending. Tells us the Tanakh, the book. Oh wow. והשם שב את שבות איוב בהתפלל לו בעד רעהו, ויוסף השם את כל אשר לאיוב למשנה, ויבואו אליו גם אחד וכל אחיותיו וכל ילדיו לפנים, ויאכלו עמו לחם בביתו, etc. והשם ברך את אחרית איוב מראשיתו, ואילו 14,000 צאן ו6,000 גמלים ו1,000 צמד בקר ו1,000 אתונות, ואילו 7 בנים ו3 בנות. Okay, so he had everything. He had more, even more children than he had. So everything was good. Okay, now you read that and you say, I understand if someone lost their wealth and then regained it and regained even more, and you say, at the end everything was good. They went through a rough patch, but at the end of the day, turned out well. They made it, and now they're happy. They could forget all the bad things that ever happened to them. But telling us about, can you say that about children? That he lost 3 children, but now Hashem gave him 7, so he's overall he did well. You can't say that, and so that really that sounds like a fairy tale more than a real story.
But coming back to your opening premise, that the whole point of this book is relationship with Hashem.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems a bit odd that we're talking about a relationship with Hashem. It's based on a fictional character rather than a real character. That argues more for a real character instead.
You're absolutely right, and that's why I think that is also part of why Chazal really pulled it to that.
Why do you have to make up a figure?
And in order to help us get back to that, from what I just said now, that this sort of pulls to the fictional. Chazal, the Ramban does explain, because he was bothered by this. The Ramban says that Iyov's children didn't really die. He thought they died, but they were captured and then they came back. Now that is quite a fascinating thing to say, right? It's really a stretch, but you see how much the Ramban was bothered by this question, right? So the Ramban had to say what he said, because if not, it makes no sense. But okay, it could be that there's a hint to Ramban in one of the opinions of who was Iyov, and this is what I'm going to end with this. Chazal, not who was Iyov, but when Iyov lived. One of the opinions are that he lived during the generation of Yaakov Avinu. Now, why would the Tana of all times come up with the generation of Yaakov Avinu? What was so special with Yaakov Avinu? So, in a way, we could see Yaakov Avinu as sort of a Iyov figure. He lost his children, and he lived a life. When Yaakov comes to Paro, then Paro asks, right, Kama Yemei Shnei Chayecha, and he tells Paro, Me'at v'ra'im hayu yemei shnei chayei. That's how he sums up his life. My life were few and bad, and he lived 22 years thinking that he lost his son and etc. And he was misarev leitnachem. So so much so that when the other children want to take Binyamin, then he tells them, Atem yedatem ki shnayim yalda li ishti. What a thing to say. Yaakov sees himself as having 2 sons. That's it. Shnayim yalda li ishti. He has 1 wife and 2 sons. Then he has other something, but they're not really his. They're like sort of second-rated wives and therefore second-rated children. He tells it to his children. It's not even right. So that's how he lives his life. So he has 2 children. He lost 1, and he's living under the impression that he lost everything. And then at the end, wow, comes back. Everything is restored. So maybe that's where the Ramban got it from. I don't know. But that's. So I'll summarize what we saw now. We spoke about the book of Iyov. how should we frame the book of Iyov? What kind of book it is? Is it so? It's very tempting to see it as a theological book, and so many see it. We spoke about Rambam, but many more. But it could be that it's not theological per se, but it's more about our relationship with Hashem, meaning not a question of how is it that Hashem makes human beings suffer, but how human beings deal with suffering when it seems to be unjustifiable, and what does that mean with how does that impact our relationship with Hashem, and what does that mean? It could be that is the focus of the book. Then I said something about the historical or fictional part of the book, so we could pull it there or here. But so that is the framework of the book in general. I don't know about. I love philosophy. I love theology, but when I read Iyov, or even general, when I read Tanakh from a personal perspective, more as from the human perspective, it seems to make more sense to me. But I don't say that you have to accept it, but just my suggestion. So that's my opening to Iyov, and we'll continue. Just one thing, next week, no shiur, but the week after that, I'll be back.
I think that Iyov, we are Iyov.
Mm-hmm,
The Jews are Iyov. And we are tested, maybe, but we have to react. And we see that exactly just like Iyov, after the Holocaust, we got Israel, and we.
Yes.
So just like in Noah, when God had the Mabul and he regretted because he regretted. And I think, for me, I see the parallel between this episode of Noah and the episode after the Holocaust. Like God regretted to Haster Panim, and then after that, all the wars that Israel had, they won all the wars until now.
Yeah, no, we could see parallels. I agree with you. That I think that is all part of the I think
We
you're
are
right.
you.
Yeah, in many ways, right.